Today, I would like to discuss a rather interesting solution to the American dilemma. And as usual, I give a little bit background to, I'll use myself personally as a backdrop to the point of the video. First, I want to say this. The other video, The Naked Truth, the stage play that I had recited word for word, is, I will go on record, that it is 99% true. The only thing are some of the names have been changed. So with that in mind, I had a very tough life. When my father had passed on, and then my sister had done some horrible things to me. And then later on in 1970 in New Jersey, Wellingborough, New Jersey to be specific, they had done some terrible things to me. They didn't know how to handle me. And eventually I went to that bad school that I spoke about in that play. And then the state of New Jersey bribed my mother to shut her up. That they'll get her the best school in the world for me. Wood School in Langhorne, Pennsylvania. And at that time when I was in that school in 1972 and then again in 1976, the Social Security Administration took out a number out on, a Social Security number out on me. They filed it themselves. My mother had nothing to do with it. And what they did was purposely, and I went through at the time, later on in the 90s, through the United States, Frank Lautenberg, the United States Senator of New Jersey. He's since passed on, but I'm sure in his files you could find the records of what I had asked him to do. But anyway, when I was in Wood School in 1972 and 76, they applied for a Social Security number. Now, who did it was the Division of Youth and Family Services in New Jersey, along with the state of New Jersey and along with the Social Security Administration. And what they did was my father's, I'm not going to give you my Social Security number, of course, but I'll give you the three digits, the first three digits. My father's Social Security number was 185. And what they did with me was they purposely, and I didn't figure this out till many years later, by the way, they purposely changed his numbers from 185 to 581, which makes me that I was born in Puerto Rico. And I was really born in Philadelphia, in Northeast Philadelphia, in the Albert Einstein Hospital. And so they did that to me, and they defrauded me, and there was a money laundering scheme through Puerto Rico and wherever else have you, and the state of New Jersey officials pocketed tens of thousands of dollars through this false account in my name. And then when I graduated from that boarding school, Wood School, then they defrauded me again with giving me a fake education diploma. And they pretty much screwed me out of a good life, even though I have the potential of doing, could have done a lot of things, could have went to college. I could have done a lot of things, It's a travesty what they have done to me over a lifetime. And so what I did was, I went through a lot of I went through the United States District Court in Trenton, New Jersey. I went into Third Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. I mean, this is all record, all public record if you want to look it up. Of course, you don't have my full name, but maybe someday I'll give you my full name if you're really interested and know what's going on here. So I took the government to court, and because the issues were so old, no attorney would touch it. So I had to do everything pro se, and that's how I learned a lot about law. I had to do my own legal arguments and law papers. But what always came back from the state of New Jersey or from the Wellingborough Board of Education or whatever have you was res judicata or statute of limitations. And so they eventually just dismissed all my stuff because I had no claim based upon the statute of limitations. I'm trying these cases in the 90s when they happened back in the 70s, and it's, by law, they automatically win. Then I went to Morristown Memorial Hospital, Morristown, New Jersey. That's with an I, Morristown, New Jersey. And a doctor had diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder. And what the state was afraid was that I could take that and apply that in my cases. And it could possibly open up, give you a little wiggle room on the statute of limitations. So when I asked for my medical files for Morristown Memorial Hospital, what they did was they deliberately put down, instead of post-traumatic stress disorder, they put down post-traumatic Stein disorder. And that was submitted to the court, and the court was like, what the heck is this? What kind of diagnosis is this? What kind of disorder is this? And it went nowhere. So all these things happened to me for a long period of time there, and all my cases were dismissed. So what I did was, in 1999, I always paid my federal income tax, always filed on April 15th all my life, since I was 18, did that every year. And then what I did was, on April 15th of 1999, I put all the cases that I've tried, all the issues, all my past, everything, and I put it in this, 20, 30-page letter. And I sent it to the Internal Revenue Service, the Commissioner Rossellini at the time. His last name was Rossellini. And I said, for all the crap, all the shit that you did to me all my life, I will no longer be filing any income tax, let alone I will put down all exempt on my federal income tax forms when I apply for a job. And I said, if you have a problem with that, and I will say that right fucking now, that if you have a fucking problem with that, Mr. IRS, take my ass to court. Let's bring all this shit out that you did to me all my fucking years. All my years. And I'm looking dead at you, motherfucker. I ain't afraid of the federal government. And that's the problem with Americans. They're afraid. They have fear of the American government, the federal government. And all I can say is, fuck you. And the way I did my fuck you was from April 15th of 1999, I no longer paid my federal income tax. And that's the biggest way, the most potent, in-your-face way of saying fuck you to the federal government. And I'm probably the only American that gets away with that. And it's not a question of getting away with it. It's a question of justice. That's all it is. It's justice. For all the shit that they did to me all those years. And they even do it to me today. In my own life. Today with my job and everything. Always plotting and bullshit, And then people say, oh, it's all in your head or whatever. Oh, this shit goes on to this day. But anyway, the point is that they are afraid of the truth. For the public to know how American person to go through all the trials and tribulations that I have gone through, especially at a very early age, when I was 12, 13 years old. And back in 1971, a 12-year-old was an actual 12-year-old. These days, when you think of a 12-year-old, you think he's much older almost. But back in those days, we were considered an actual 12-year-old. And not only that, but because of my emotional disturbances and stuff, it's actually in one of my medical papers, I was actually said to be more, because of my emotional disturbances, I was more of an 8-year-old rather than a 12-year-old. So I decided that the only way I will ultimately seek justice is, and I'm probably, it's the irony of it all is I probably have lost money. I mean, I always got refunds from the federal government all the time when I would file. So I probably lost money throughout the years by not filing. But that's not the point on why I'm doing it. The ultimate way to say fuck you to the federal government that we have in place since 1913 is not to pay your federal income tax, to put down on your W-4 forms, exempt. And I will continue to do that the rest of my life, because it's my way of seeking justice. Now, the other point to this video is that, you have a bunch of characters out there rioting and joining militias and going up against the government and threatening the government and all this bullshit. And how I'm going to entitle the title that I want to put to this video is, it's going to be called Bloodless Revolution. And that is, and the only way to do this is if you got all the mothers to do this as well as the fathers. It can't just be, just a bunch of little individuals doing this shit. But if you got I think we have about 320 million Americans in America. And let's say if you got about 205 million Americans to stop paying their federal income tax, as well as not file every April 15th of every year, you would have a revolution in this country, an uprising against the government without shedding any blood. Now, I don't particularly advise that unless you know what you're doing, because in my case it's much different, because they're afraid of the truth in my case. They don't want to have all that shit. And, I would like for them to do that, but they're too fucking smart to do that. So they fuck with me, in other words. They fuck with my job. They fuck with my wife, with her things in her life. Just, fuck with your name, your credibility, defame you. That's the way they handle you. They have their ways of smearing you and controlling you and manipulating you and all this other bullshit. And then turn around and say, oh, it's just in your head. You're just being paranoid. But anyway, yeah, if 205 million Americans didn't do that, if they didn't file on the April 15th of every year, and stop paying their federal income tax and make it they're all exempt. Because the whole concept of no funds, no war. Yeah, well, Congress didn't have the funds. They'd have no. Eventually, they'd have no money to fight their wars and have all their social programs and all this other crap. That's really unneeded. All this shit came into place since 1913. Yeah, the First World War, as I spoke about in the other videos. Then come along FDR. You have all the social programs start to kick into place. You start to have Social Security kick into place. And then in the 1960s, through Johnson, you have the Medicare, Medicaid kick into place. Welfare. Then eventually food stamps, all this shit. If the people had the money, they would not give it to the government all the time, they'd be empowered. So there is such a thing as a bloodless revolution, but it can't be done by just 1 million people or 2 million people. It has to be done by 205 million people all at once. And that will close down the government quick. And I always say that like anyone in government, I don't care if it's the President of the United States, U.S. Supreme Court Justice, United States Senator, the majority, whatever. You could be a senator, you could be a representative, whatever. You could be a janitor, you could be whatever the fuck, doesn't matter. They should take everyone's average pay in America and figure out a median average pay. So probably average pay would be probably about $45,000-$50,000 a year. That's about probably the average of everyone's everyone's yearly paycheck. Cumulative. So therefore, everyone in government should only make no more than $50,000 a year, and then they should tax 10% on that. And so for $50,000, they should only make $55,000 tops. They shouldn't have. They should have to pay their own medical benefits or their own medical insurance. They shouldn't have pensions. Americans, for the most part, don't have pensions. The federal government should reflect exactly what the Americans are all about these days. Hardly any American has a pension. Hardly any American even has medical insurance that they can afford. People are under the concept that, well, you get medical insurance, great, but meanwhile, you have to pay a $5,000 deductible before the insurance even kicks in. So you still wind up in debt. So you still wind up not using your insurance because you're afraid to have to pay that deductible. It was a big con, once again, on the American people. From yours truly, Obama, on down. And so they will have no pensions, they have no medical benefits. They shouldn't even have Social Security. They shouldn't have Medicaid or Medicare. They shouldn't have really anything. They shouldn't have expense accounts. Average American have an expense account? I don't think so. I don't think an average American has an expense account. If any money that they get for their campaigning should come out of people that donate to them. I don't care who donates. It could be a multi-billionaire, or it could be some peddler in the street that gives them a couple dimes. Now, that's his issue. If he wants to get into office, he has to figure out how to get his campaign money. But he shouldn't have an expense account once he gets in office. So that's the other thing, So, and my question is, how many federal officials would stay there? Like if the NSA, the FBI, or the CIA directors all got $55,000 a year, and no expense accounts, no helicopters, no private planes, no free lunches, no trips wherever, no business trips paid for, or any of that to reflect the American people. How many people would stay in office? Very few. It would shrink the government by probably 90%. Literally shrink it. You know, people always say, "Oh, we have such a big government. It's always expanding." Well, that's all you have to do. Let it reflect the American people, and they'd be running for the hills. So anyway, that's my rant. But the thing is in order for me to seek my justice on a personal basis, I don't file. Since April 15th of 1999, I don't file my income tax, and I'm exempt on my checks. Every time I apply for a job, that's what I do. And that's how I have been able to seek my justice. So I'll tell you something, to be quite honest, that especially if you listen to the naked truth, and now I'm telling you it's 99% true. The only thing that's not true is a couple of names I've changed. But outside of that, it's all true, actually. I'm going to go on the record, it's all true. And I figure from all that shit that I've gone through, that, and never having been able to win any lawsuits or anything to justify anything, especially my education that I lost, I receive my justice due by not paying my federal income tax, or not filing every year. And probably not many Americans have lived my type of life, especially a kid that was raised to have been, I could have been anything if things went in my favor. But unfortunately, things go against me, especially when I was much younger. That, just tends to make one, it hardens you a little bit, hardens you up a little bit. But it's mainly my lawsuits and that were thrown out or dismissed for lack of claim based on statute of limitations and or all the things they had done to me in my past. And that's the reason why I don't pay my federal income tax or file every year. Like I said, I don't advise anyone to do that unless you do it in a serious amount of numbers. And I'm not talking just 1 million here, or 2 million here, or 10,000 here. No. If you have 205 million people that organize and act upon it on April 15th, then you will have something that the federal government, they won't fuck with you. If you have 205 million Americans strong, they won't fuck with you. But if you just have 1 million here, or 1 here, or 10,000 here, or whatever, yeah, you're going to get in trouble and thrown in the jail. You're going to confiscate your fucking house and your cars and everything else you got. So my particular case is much different. And it's not so much of me, but it's the truth that they don't like. The government hates the truth. They want to suppress that as much as they can, unless it makes them look good. Now, if the truth makes them look good, absolutely, they'll take you to court. But if the truth makes them look bad, they're going to suppress that shit as much as they fucking can. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you. Have a good day.